Hello YouTube, I'm Toby. Now this right here is my AMD FX4300 build, and the graphics card you're seeing on the screen right now is the RX460. Now initially when I built this thing, it had a GTX 650. It just simply wasn't powerful enough, so I went ahead and purchased a used RX460. Now the RX460 is somewhat on par with the GTX 1050, so the one I have in here, I gave it a slight overclock just to even it out a little bit. Now the system itself, as it's mentioned before, consists of the FX4300 and 8GB of DDR3 RAM and the aforementioned RX460. Now, so as you can probably guess, today's video will be benchmarking the RX460 just to see how well it fares. We are going to play Counter-Strike Global Offensive and well, PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, since that was pretty much the use for this system. Now before we get into the actual benchmarking, let's look at the specs of this particular RX460. As you can probably tell, it's just a little bit bigger than my hand. I honestly expected it to be bigger, but well, it's powerful enough. Now this is a very low power card. It doesn't have any extra 6-pin or 8-pin connectors. It's simply just powered off of the PCIe slot on the motherboard. Now this particular model is built by ASUS, and it has 2GB of GDDR5 VRAM. Now when I got this card, the core was clocked at 1224 MHz and the memory was clocked at 1750 MHz. Now I have overclocked this to 1300 MHz on the core and 1800 on the memory, just so we get a little bit more punch. But let's get into the benchmarking of this card. Alright, so the Resident Evil 6 benchmarking tool is running. I have all these settings set to high. Do keep in mind that this screen is 720p, so that's what the resolution has been set to. Alright, so we scored 10,502 on the Resident Evil 6 benchmarking tool. That's actually pretty good. The GTX 650 only got 6,500, so this is a well, a very good improvement. Alright, so we're in the map called Shipped, and in my experience, if your system can run this map, it can pretty much run any CSGO map out there. And we are running around 60 to 70 frames per second. Sometimes it's actually quite higher. Right now it was just above 80, so alright, so we are actually sometimes experiencing frame rates up around the 100, so I would definitely call CSGO playable on the system. But then again, anything else would be weird. CSGO should be able to run on a potato, so it would be weird if we were having issues in this game with this card. Alright, so we finally got to PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds. Currently in the airplane we're running about, well, 90 to 100 frames per second. We are running at medium to low settings, so it's probably not going to look that good, but I'm hopeful for this. Alright, so the Eagle has landed. We are around 30 frames per second right now. We are experiencing a little bit of stutter, but this should hopefully die down. Nice. So firefights indoors are actually quite easy. Running around 50 to 60 frames per second indoors, so that is not too bad actually. Ah man, ha! Alright, so we're now back in the old map. I did notice in the desert map that when we were indoors or in close quarter we were seeing 60 to 70 frames per second, but once we got outside into the larger areas we were running at around 30 to 40 frames per second, so a little bit of a frame drop there. I'm excited to see how well the old map fares. Alright, so we have landed, and once again outside we're running between 30 and 40 frames per second. So I'm not expecting much of a difference between the actual two maps, but still a chance that might be better in this map. Alright, so we're actually outside. I just rated all the buildings and we're running around 50 to 60 frames per second. So for what it is right now, the old map actually seems to be running a lot smoother than the well, the new desert map. Nade kill. That's awesome. Outside firefighting actually seems to be, well, enjoyable actually. Contrary to the GTX 650, this thing can actually handle this game. Alright, whoa. Oh man. Yeah, I may be in trouble right here. I'm outside, it's red zoned. Ah man. I thought I was a sneaky bastard there, but I guess not. Alright, so let's see what the MSI Afterburner says. We have reached 100% on the CPU, but it seems to be hovering around the 80s most of the gameplay throughout PUBG. RAM usage, we've used 6.5 gigabytes of our total 8 gigabytes, so we have 1.5 gigabytes to spare. And as I can see right here, our GPU maximum temperature was 56 degrees Celsius, and yeah, that seems to hold up. GPU usage looks a little weird. It has used 100% maximum, and as you can see, it's been dipping a little bit. I did experience a little stuttering, but it's actually not that, well, not too bad. And as we can see here, we've used 1980 megabytes of VRAM, which is just short of our 2 gigabyte limit. And I'm assuming this is the power draw on the GPU, and we've used a maximum of 50 watts. So it should be rated at a TDP of 75 watts, so we should have a little headroom on the heat. Alright, so that was a fairly short in-depth video on the RX460. Now, when coupled with the FX 4300 and 8 gigabytes of RAM, it actually seems that the game is playable and enjoyable. I will have to say that it was mostly enjoyable in the old foliage map rather than the desert map. Not sure why that is. It would seem that the old foliage map would have a lot more textures used, but for some reason it seemed that the desert map was pulling the hardest strain on the the graphics card. Could be because there's a longer view distance and it has to render more terrain, except for just covering up the terrain with trees. Now keep in mind that all these benchmarks were in 720p. I do believe that it can handle 1080p fairly well actually. Now if you like this system, I actually have a video on my channel where I first built and benchmarked this using the GTX 650. I gotta say I love this case, and definitely find it interesting with the 400mm intake fan on the side. But all that's left for me regarding this system is pretty much just cleaning the outside, covering up the huge scratch on the back, and putting on some feet, and then the system is actually good to go. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you very much for watching.